RPR. We're really excited to have him here. He's a very requested speaker all around the country, so we're thrilled to have him here today. And go ahead and eat while he's talking. I'm sure he won't mind. So, Randy.
All right, so social media is probably, I would say, in my best guess, about 15 years old. The problem is we didn't know what it was when it first came out. So there's been this evolution of social media happening over the last decade and a half. So we're going to look at that, and we're going to start off in the beginning, okay? Now, one thing I want you to pay attention to is how the tools change over time. So I don't want you in social media to get too attached to any one tool, okay? That goes for even the large networks today, like Facebook. They are all resources to help you get to your sphere and get to new contacts, but understand that the strategy will work as new tools come out. And we see this happening. We're going to cover Google+, which just came out. We're already seeing the next evolution of social media take place, okay? So let's start off. Let's just briefly look at early social. And I want to tie early social into search. And the reason I want to do that is because when we started using the internet, we went to search engines to ask questions, right? We went in to ask a question about a place to go to dinner, where we can find something, a favorite type of shoes, a book, whatever it was. The problem with early search was it was pretty bad. We actually didn't have a lot of great experiences. Matter of fact, we bounced around from search engine to search engine because the results were not that relevant. So then about 97, this Google came about, and we liked what we saw. It had potential. The problem is our trust wasn't extremely high. Okay, if you understand that, we had a result set that came back to us, but we were guarded. We didn't know whether we should trust those search results or not. And about that time, we were seeing review sites really take off. And I have the picture of Amazon back then in 1995. Now, one of the reasons Amazon is included in my social media presentation is because this is where reviews really started to take off, okay? And you say, well, how is that social? Well, it was really when we started to have those conversations online. So it just, in this case, happened to be about books in the very beginning. But we could go on and we could leave a comment asking somebody what they thought of a particular book. And they could reply back, and then we could ask another question. And what we found through these interactions, though, was our trust was much higher with that because we were talking with another human, and we valued that interaction more, okay? So we can start to see the groundworking of social media take place here. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time on the early social media because it gets a lot better. As we fast forward to the next chapter, which we'll call Social 2.0, it may not have felt like that, but Social 2.0 was when everything started to come together, okay? Now, the first part I'm going to look at in Social 2.0 is actually when blogs became all the rage. And I say this because you've probably all had somebody come up to you and say, you need to blog for your real estate business. How many of you, let me just see you raise your hands up, how many of you have a blog? I thought I would see more faces, but that's great. I do see some hands up. Okay, so basically blogs were social because what happened was an author would go out and they would write content around a given topic, and we could converse in the comment thread back and forth, back and forth. Now, in early social media, bloggers were motivated by things they were interested in. It's still the same today. They were interested in their hobbies. There was a very short little sliver there. You can see the corporate usage. I mean, it's tiny. But what happened there is, again, our trust went through the roof when we were reading this copy because people were sharing real-life experiences, and we could get that one-to-one reaction or interaction that we were looking for. Now, we ended up spiking through the bell curve, and we passed all the early adopters, and we're actually more in the laggards period of the adoption curve now with blogging. But blogging itself is still on the uprise, okay? So here's a couple charts that will detail who's reading blogs and who write blogs. And I just want to show you that, and by the way, obviously the future dates are forecasts, but we're seeing that not only are more people continue to read blogs and their authority will continue to rule, but more people will continue to write blogs. In the US, by 2014, it's predicted that about 33.4 million folks in the US will be updating blogs on a regular basis. So pretty amazing stuff. Now, why are they doing that? Well, turns out blogs rank really well on search engines, okay? And that's just one of the byproducts there. But I'm not going to go down that road because this is a social media trends presentation. But what happens when you have 30 million people writing blogs? Well, you get a big mess of content, right? And so social media began to evolve a little bit more, and we started to see these sites pop up, which we'll call aggregators, okay? And if you don't know about these aggregators, you might want to just write down a couple other names because they are very useful. But we saw aggregators that came onto the scene that let the community vote the best articles to the top. So the whole idea was the community got to say what was the best, and then that content rose to the top, and then as users, we could curate that content and share it with our network, okay? We also had sites pop up where we could bookmark our favorite sites, and then we could actually share that with other networks. We had tools come up where we could take a blog's RSS feed, and we could aggregate that with 100 of our other favorite blogs, and we could use it like a newspaper, and that would be the Google Reader. And then we had more of the like all-top style where it's just a categorization of blogs. And so you could know nothing about a given sector. You could say click real estate, you could go in and you could see all the top blogs in real estate. And again, all the best seems to rise to the top. So at this point in social media, which is in the middle of say 2005, it all started to come together. What we started to see was more folks reading content online and starting to create connections. And I kind of like this comic because this is what it felt like. It says, I'm switching everything over to the internet, my phone, my bills, my TV, and my human contact. It kind of feels like that sometimes, you know? Everyone's communicating online, and if you watch the younger generation, and we were just talking about this last night at dinner, they're doing all this while doing their homework and playing video games. So it's pretty amazing. Now, so all this content's out there, and at the same time, and so we're digging that, we're really liking being able to read this user-generated content, and now the social scene starts to take off. We start to actually form one-to-one contacts on social networks. And so, just to be clear, this is what's happening on networks like Facebook, right? We identify another user, maybe it's somebody in our sphere, somebody, a past client. We actually start to make this one-to-one connection, and through that, the trust of what they were sharing went up through the roof. So we could start to cue in to the subtle signs that our network was giving us. And we're going to call this ambient awareness. So ambient awareness is basically like communicating with your network online, but it's almost like they're in the room with you because you're seeing the little things they're sharing throughout the day, and so you start to kind of feel like they're there. You understand that they're going on vacation, or that they just read this book, or whatever they're doing. And so this is when we really started to get it and started to feel like social media was going to be a win for the business. And I want to point out what happens on social networks, and this is really important for the real estate sector in terms of growing your sphere. On social networks, we were able to first connect with those connections that made sense. Like I said, our sphere, our family, but then through constant sharing, we were able to expand our network out to that next level. So we were able to connect with our friends' friends, and we were able to connect with our family's friends, and so on. And so this network effect started to grow and spider out, okay? And the information we got back was a little more relevant as a result. Mobile is really critical to social media because if you think about it, 50% or so of the interactions that happen on these social networks happens from our devices. There seem to be two devices that rule right now, and that's the Android and the iPhone. I heard an interesting stat the other day. The Android is the #1 selling OS, and the #1 manufactured phone would be the iPhone, so with Apple. So these pieces were critical though to social media taking off because they allowed us to share our life in the moment where we were, right? Not back at the desktop. Now, something started to happen, and you remember in the beginning of the presentation I brought up search, and you might not have felt like that was a great fit for social media, but the reason I did is we're starting to see a convergence, especially in 2011. But before I get there, I want to mention where search first got social. And it didn't happen from the places you might think. It didn't come from Google, it didn't come from Yahoo or any of those other ones. It actually came from some of these newer networks like Twitter, okay? And you might say, well, how is search happening on Twitter? Well, it was happening because people were asking their network the things they used to turn to Google for, right? And so when I was making this presentation, I just quickly looked in my stream. By the way, if you're not on Twitter, your stream is the activity of your connections all aggregated together, and it's commingled down the screen. And I just quickly looked at it, and I pulled out 3 quick questions. And you can see this is how folks are using it. They're not only sharing what they're doing, but they're asking what's going on about this or that. And so this is from my perspective where search and social started to commingle. Matter of fact, Facebook figured that out, and they went ahead, there we go, and launched a specific application called Facebook Questions, which would get at the heart of the whole people-to-people search, right? Because they understand that our trust is higher with that type of search. But this scared Google, because see, Google's been essentially getting more and more trust with us over the years, but they can't do the whole relationship thing well, right? They didn't have a product that would help. I say they didn't have a product, they had a few products, but none that was deep-reaching that could truly tell our relationships, okay? So basically, the race was on to become the hub and to start to find out who all of our connections were, okay? And let me just bring up this next little slide. So a few things popped on the scene. One thing we'll call Facebook Connect, there was Google Friend Connect, and then Twitter has Twitter Connect. What these were designed to do is to essentially be authentication protocols. So if they would work with a site, you could log in, you could use these APIs to actually recognize your relationships and share easier with the networks, okay? And then on the back end, Facebook, Google, and Twitter could start to learn about you. And they could start to develop what we're calling the social graph, where they understand all of our connections and how we relate to each other. Remember that picture I showed you with the circles? It's all relating back to that. Now I'll tell you, when it comes to this this backbone, Facebook definitely won out. But what you started to see happen, and I don't know how well you can see this, is suddenly every site began to add these little share buttons. You've probably seen them now. Share buttons were all the rage, they still are the rage. And what that did was it took content from a website, a blog, or any of those, and it put it back into these networks, okay? And then your network essentially could interact with that in one way or another. Now, one thing we found that was very interesting when that happened was articles had new life brought into them. Suddenly, when your network is telling you what to read, it's a little more interesting than going to one of these mainstream aggregators in which you know nobody and you're not getting clued into the best content.